Hello, this is Alum here for a video review on Milestone number 9. So we'll start off here. We have the introduction slide. Then we have a slide and video relating to new inventory slot. In particular, 3 inventory slots which are for new charms and or trinkets, and is the slot that the Vox can move to from the current necklace slot. They also have added visible buffs, so when you have a buff on you, you see an icon to know what that buff is, and you can hover over and see a description of that buff now as well. We have a slide and video on that. The Phoenix pet, which was previously using the Hawks model, now has its own in-game model, so there's a slide and video on that as well. The Siphon of Chaos rings, which were used in the Glimpse into the Unknown event, have had some modifications, and I go into that. There were 4 new weapons added over the past month, 3 within the first day of the Glimpse into the Unknown event, and another weapon just after that event. Those weapons now have actual non-placeholder in-game icons, in addition to in-game 3D models. Female orcs have now been added to the game, and anybody who has an orc exemplar can choose between male or female as desired. There's been a lot of talk about Skywound Mine, which is a dungeon off of Narrow's Landing, so I have some information related to that, in addition to a video showing how to get to Skywound Mine based on what the previous game file's entrance portal location suggested. New player progression is something that's always important, particularly since the last milestone added hollows, and there's been some adjustments to the game to correspond to better progression for new players. Looting issue has been a major issue for this whole year, and I go into a bunch of the current issues related to looting and potential changes to resolve one of the biggest issues with the game at the present. After that, I have a slide and a series of short videos on various bugs. Some are quite interesting, and as per usual, I will finish off with my final thoughts. Charm and trinket slots. So lots of information to go through here. So on the far left is they look at one of the new charms, and each different race of the 5 races, human, dwarf, orc, halfling, and elf. Now it doesn't matter if your Vox or VEXI is a male or female, they all have the same icon. In this case, the halflings are all female, the humans are all male, the orcs are all male, the dwarves are all male, and the elves are all female. On the far right there, we can see a new design of the inventory. We've noticed that the head slot item has been removed and the lantern is now in that location. The shield and instrument are still not within the game, but those are blacked out, but they have not been removed from the inventory menu. And on the far left, you see 3 bag slots, and those are for various charms. And charms will be used for a variety of things, such as buffs, resistances, and or protection from things such as curses. Now the exemplars have had a change, a fairly significant change. Previously, a matching Vox exemplar gave you 30 hit points, which is a 30% bonus over your base 100. And if you had an animal or one of the special Vox, then you got 10% bonus. However, you could equip that on any exemplar. So that's now been changed to 25,000 energy, up from the base of 50,000 energy. So 50% more energy instead of 30% more hit points. One thing of note though is that the special Vox, the Deer, Wolf, Hawk, Troll, Minotaur, and Dragon, that used to give you the plus 10 hit points, now don't have any particular effect. So that's been a major nerf to those particular Vox, and those being the rarest Vox, if anything, I think they should be better, not nothing. So that's something that's probably should get changed at some point. The interesting thing about these charms is that even if you have, say, multiple of the same exemplar type VEXI, so let's say the Elf All-Sight VEXI charm, let's say I have 5 of those. I can't equip them in all 3 slots. I can only equip all 5 of them in one slot, all 5 of them in the other, all 5 of them in the 3rd slot. And they don't stack. So if you have a 5 of them, you don't get 125,000 energy, you still get just the 25,000 energy. The other thing is you cannot split them. So if you said, oh, well, I have 5, I'll just split them, then put, say, 4 or 3 in charm 1 and 1 in charm 2 and 1 in charm 3, you can't do that either. Another thing of interest is that the Vox and or VEXI used to be in the Vox slot that you can see on the far right there, which was a necklace slot. People that have their Vox still in that slot continue to get the 30 hit points. If you want to instead have the 25,000 energy and go instead from, the Womp Womp to the Energizer Bunny here, then you need to unequip that VEXI or Vox, whatever you want to call it, and then you can equip it to one of your charm slots instead. Personally, I plan on not removing my Vox from my next slot because I don't really want that much more energy. That would just make the game so much easier, right? I'm going to have to harden it out and stick to my hit points, I think. Okay, and here we have a video. So first I'm going to equip the Human Alchemist VEXI. And you see it gave a little buff, plus 25,000 energy, and the charm slot went in the far left. I now still have 100 hit points, but I have 75,000 energy. I can then, of course, equip all of my other base item NFTs, such as rings, lantern, and owl. Note that you cannot move the VEXI charm to the old Vox slot, however you can move it to any of the charm slots that you desire. And all buffs will be shown. Now in this case, you can see how my old Vox is still in that slot, but it didn't give me the 25,000 energy, instead I have the 30 hit points. Okay, visible buffs. Now we did have a little bit of a preview of the buffs from that last video. However, after this slide I have a video that goes into that in more detail. So at the present there's 5 different kinds of buffs that you can see. There's 3 different damage types. The resistance associated with that would be whether that be crush, pierce, or slash damage. The energy buff, which is the 25,000 energy you get from the VEXI when in the VEXI charm slot. And bandages, and that little upside down C over the plus symbol, that's the time remaining on the bandage to get the full 45 hit points. It's important to note that if you didn't unequip your old VEXI, you will not see the plus 30 hit point buff that you're still getting from that on your visible buffs bar. Also, it's interesting to note, and you can see that in the image on the right, is that each item that gives you a buff will have its own icon, even if it gives you the same buff. So in that particular case, I have 2 icons granting me plus 5% extra protection against crush attacks, and one of them is providing me plus 10%. So instead of it just showing one icon of plus 20%, it shows you that you have each one individually, which isn't so much of an issue now, but if we got to the point where we had a huge number of buff items, it could become somewhat problematic. In this particular case, it's 2 epic Siphon of Chaos Rings in addition to a legendary Owl for a total of plus 20% crush resistance, or 60 total crush resistance if having a full set of Brigandine armor equipped. And it's important to note that the buff percentages add up, and then you take that and you multiply. So 50 is your total base crush resistance with the Brigandine armor set, and you multiply that by the 20%, which is 1.2, for a total of 60 crush resistance. This is noticeable when fighting the Brute. Previously, with maximum crush resistance, his melee swing did 20 damage, and now it does only 15 damage. So that 5 extra crush resistance that you get is decreasing damage taken by 25%. From that attack. It's quite significant. Now it does appear that his Enraged Smash, which happens in phase 2, has gotten buffed. Previous with max resistance you were taking 48 damage. you now take 45 damage, whereas you have 5 additional resistance, you would expect it to take 43 damage instead. So it does seem like his attack got a 2-point damage buff with this patch. Now the 45 damage you take is exactly the same amount of hit points that a bandage restores. So if you do get hit by a smash, 1 bandage will completely negate the damage taken. Another important thing to note is when you first log into the game, if you have your rings and such equipped, you first need to unequip them and then re-equip them for the buffs to take effect. And this video is going into more detail on showing how the buffs work here. So first off, we see that we have the 3 buffs from crush attacks, 10, +5, and +5. And if you change your armor up, you see that with the full Brigadine, you get a maximum of 60 crush resistance. Now, if I then unequip my rings, you see as I unequip them, each individual buff is removed. Now, if you re-equip them, of course, the buffs come back, as noted in this video. Okay, on to the new Phoenix model. So, as I mentioned previously, and in a previous video, I showed that the Hawk and the Phoenix were sharing the same model, but the Phoenix did have its own icon all along. But now it has a nice new 3D animated model, and personally I think it's the nicest of all the pets. So on the top right there, you can see what the Phoenix looks like when it's actively flying. In this case, it's flying in front of the Wisp waterfall. And the image down below there is what the Phoenix looks like in your inventory screen at max wingspan. Now the Phoenix is currently providing plus 10% slash damage resistance. However, there is plans to change that to molten damage resistance in the future, and I do have a slide later on related to various damage resistances and the plans going forward in that regard. Now if you do want a Phoenix model, there's a few places to get them. You can get one off NFT Harbor, you can get off OpenSea, or you can still provide them on the Gala store. However, I will note that NFT Harbor and OpenSea tend to be considerably cheaper than the Gala store at the present. And here we have a video showing the Phoenix. So first off, we'll equip the Phoenix, and you see it pops in there on the inventory screen above your right shoulder. And that's similar to what we see in game. So this is a third person looking at the Phoenix in game while it's flying above you, and then it also can kind of circle around you as well, which is quite nice, as you can see. Also interesting enough, you see a player there who's using a club. Clearly they don't know that everybody else uses a spear, a sword, or a hammer. The Siphon of Chaos ring changes. So what I have here is the in-game information of all 3 current Siphon of Chaos rings, from uncommon to rare to epic. And unlike some items, these ones actually give different bonuses based on the rarity. The uncommon gives 2% crush resistance, the rare gives 3% crush resistance, and then the epic gives 5% crush resistance. And as you can wear 2 rings, these also stack. So your maximum amount you can get with 2 rings is plus 10% crush resistance, which is quite significant. Now these rings first came out in the Glimpse into the Unknown event, and the purpose at that time was to increase the number of points you acquired from the chaotic trace that you looted from various goblins in the game. The future plan is to not have crush damage, but rather have shadow damage resistance. And the reason why shadow damage resistance isn't implemented yet is that there's no shadow damage in the game yet to resist. In terms of acquiring these, you can buy these off of NFT Harbor, although there's not many listed. And there's still many gacha style boxes that you can purchase from the Gala store if you so desire. The new weapons. So what I have here are the new icons, their descriptions, and what they look like actually in game. So starting on the left, we have the bronze coated sword, which does exactly twice the bottom end and top end damage of the wooden sword. It requires 10 regular essence of slash, 5 bronze bars, and the wooden sword to upgrade. Then you have the bronze coated spear, which is very similar in terms of the way that the sword is working. It does exactly double the damage, bottom end and top end, however pierce damage this time instead of the sword slash damage. And following the same design, it requires the wooden spear to upgrade, 5 bronze bars, and 10 regular essence of pierce. On the far right, we have the bronze coated hammer, and that again does twice the damage of the wooden hammer. There's kind of a pattern here if you're noticing here, and the very same with the materials as well. You upgrade the wooden hammer with 10 regular essence of crush and 5 bronze bars. The oddball out here is this thing called the legendary Brutes Club. And as of the time of recording, there's only one of these in the entire game, and I happen to have it. It's an incredibly rare drop from the Goblin Brute boss, and it does absolutely ridiculous damage. It also looks really cool. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best looking weapon as well. So that previous video about me commenting on that person with the club, that was meant as a joke for people that don't actually know at this point. So in this video, we're going to go through all the various weapons, starting off with the bronze spear, which is looking pretty good there. And then we're going to switch it up with the bronze hammer. All these weapons have a 1-second attack speed now as well. The bronze sword as well, which kind of extends beyond the screen, so it's quite a long sword. Then you have the legendary Brutes Club, which also extends beyond the screen, so equally long weapon as well. So the next up is the female orc. This is the third of the female exemplar models that's been added to the game, with just the halfling and the dwarf remaining to be added. The devs in the most recent AMA did mention that all of the models have actually been completed, however the armor sets have not been fully fitted to the dwarf and halfling models yet. However, that should be completed sometime this year, in which case we'll have all of the models, both male and female, for all races. The orcs in general do have a few benefits. One is their general exemplar abilities, which are not yet in the game. However, they all do lean towards adventuring type skills. The biggest advantage at the present, however, is the fact that they're higher, so you have a better view around. It's easier to visualize things, and if you have, say, like a halfling or a dwarf in front of you, then you can essentially reach over them with your weapon, and if you're aiming at, say, the head of a mob, then they won't block your shots. However, you can easily block their shots. So the orc, in terms of combat, is potentially the best of the exemplars. In this video, I'm just going to show how to make a female orc. So you go down to where you have an orc exemplar, which the default is male. You select female and start game. The game then will load up, and you'll log in as a female orc. And there's the base model with no armor on, with a female orc. Next up is an interesting slide here, and that's damage resistances. And as of the elemental patch that they had a few milestones back, resistances became one of the most important things in terms of combat. That's typically related to the 3 different physical damage types: crush, pierce, and slash, which are the only ones that are currently in the game. However, as you can see from the magical damage types, shadow, molten, frost, toxic, ether, charged, living, radiant, and soul are planned to be added at some point. And we already know of 4 things that will have different damage type resistances in the future, and that's shadow, associated with the Siphon of Chaos Rings; molten, which is essentially fire, and that's related to the Phoenix pet; frost is the Frost Dragon pet; and toxic, which I'm assuming would be the Clearblood's racial trait, as the Clearblood's racial trait has reduced reduced damage to poison, and toxic and poison I'm assuming is what the damage type is for poison. Now in terms of the physical damage resistance, the current items for Crush are the Bronze Brigandine set, the Owl Pet, and the Siphon of Chaos Rings. For Pierce, it's a tough leather armor set, the Frost Dragon and Bald Eagle pets. And for Slash, it's the Bronze Plate armor sets and the Phoenix and Hot pets. However, as I mentioned for the magical, essentially what's happening in the future, those ones that have been added to the magical are removed from the current physical. Crush loses its Siphon of Chaos Ring, Pierce loses its Frost Dragon, and Slash loses the Phoenix for damage resistance. It'll be interesting to see what they do to completely fill this board in terms of the other various damage types. My expectation will probably see something come the Skywound Mine, which is the next slide. And here we go, the Skywound Mine Dungeon. Now the Skywound Mine Dungeon is going to be the first dungeon in Mirandus, and we haven't been told a lot about it. Whether or not this is an instance dungeon, or if there's specific entrance requirements, or if it's unlimited and it's just a stronger area, say, than a normal zone designed for groups. The things that have been known up to this point in time is that it is located off of Narrow's Landing for certain, that it will have both unique armor and weapon sets related to it, and also where in the game files the entrance portal was supposed to be, and that's at the very top of the green goblin camp. And the bottom left you can see the path from the starter outpost, how to get there, up to the entrance where it's currently blocked by a rock. And there's also two screenshots in the bottom middle and the bottom right of what it looks like inside Skywound Mine, which is a very kind of dark area. So lanterns of the sun might be quite useful inside here depending on how dark it actually gets. Now in this video it's fairly simple. We're starting in Outpost 1 and we're going to go to where the Skywound Mine entrance is. And many of the people currently playing it likely know where this is. This is more designed for those who have not been playing up to this point. So you leave through the west gate of the first outpost and you follow along the path, which on the right is near a mountain chain. And you keep following, hugging that wall on the right. And I turn off my lantern here just to show how dark it is at nighttime without the lantern. Again, we're still just following that, hugging that wall on the right. Eventually you'll come up to a cave series which starts with this narrow part here. And this is the entrance to where the green goblins are. So again, you want to go to the right. Occasionally you might see a brute somewhere along this area. Typically it's on the left hand side here, just sitting there. Yeah, and there he is. And to the right there's actually kind of an old broken outpost, and there's a bunch of tin over there as well, and there's a bunch of tin on this pathway. And this is the pathway up to the Skywound Mine entrance. So there's a tin on the right there. Ahead of us on the left is a bunch more tin. You can see it highlighted there. And at the very top you can see a bunch more tin as well, in addition to another dead brute body. And that would be the entrance to Skywound Mine right there. Now next up is important, new player progression, and there's some issues with progression for new players. So I try to describe some of the major pain points for new players. So what I've noticed from watching streams of new players, in addition to my own gameplay and feedback from other people playing, in addition to what I've seen the devs do in response to make changes to improve the progression, are the following. So one of the major things, it's difficult moving from the Gambeson armor to any of the gloves and boots. Typically you get the Gambeson armor, which is very simple. You just farm a bit of flax, 7 in particular. However, the next set is you want to get some gloves and boots, and the problem with it is the gloves and boots all require bronze bars to make a portion of that. So the tough leather set, which has gloves and boots that do not require bronze, requires you killing wolves. So essentially you go from not killing any mobs at all to immediately killing wolves to progress. Now previously you could get gloves and boots by killing does and bucks, which made it very easy to progress from the start to killing the various deer, then killing the wolves, and then eventually killing the goblins. However, you skipped those two earlier parts as of this. There are three major areas you can get tin. There's the green goblin camp, there is the mother's cave or the brown goblin area, and there's also a wolf cave kind of on the midwestern portion of the map. And the wolf cave is the only relatively easy place to actually acquire it early on. A lot of the problem, however, is that because that's the easiest place to get it, people go in there and clear it out. And the people at the other places, say in the goblin areas, probably don't need tin at that point. And if those people at the goblin places are not mining tin, tin won't respawn back in the wolf cave area. Now the dev team did, as note of these various progression issues, make a bunch of extra mining nodes. However, they didn't add really new locations for them. They just added more nodes in the same locations. So although it does slow the issue where things get mined out, it still causes the problem that once those early easy to access areas are mined out, if the people that are in the other areas don't need to mine more of that, say, tin, then those easy to access areas do not get restocked. The next thing is, even if you can get the tin, you still can't craft anything because you also need copper to make bronze. There's no weapons or armor that use just copper or that use just tin. And the copper areas are all deep within goblin territories. The easiest would be the yellow goblin camp in the dead center of the map. However, there's not a lot of nodes, and the biggest set of nodes is at the very top, requiring you to go through the entire camp, which also has a brood at the top. The much more accessible area is the large goblin camp, but the large goblin camp often has hundreds of all the different types of goblins, making it not easily accessible for a new player. Most new players would not even know to look in there because you first have to wade through all these goblins to even find it, as the nodes tend to be at the back of these areas. In order to combat this, one potential thing that I could see improving is having some copper and tin at the entrance of these areas. They still might have to engage an odd goblin or wolf to access them, but at least it would tell new players that these are areas where I can actually find this resource, such that they know. Now, of course, people can look online and watch videos and stuff, and clearly if you're watching this, you're one of those people, but most new players joining the game wouldn't know these things. Another thing which I didn't mention here is that the bow is almost essentially useless. It does like no damage, and from what I've been watching on new player streams, they almost exclusively aim towards getting the bow. They try melee weapons, they're like, oh, I take too much damage, and then they switch to the bow, which does no damage, which further worsens their position. So increasing bow damage or adding in bows that actually do more damage is potentially going to help that as well. Okay, the next slide here, looting issues and changes. So based on the last event, we got some statistics showing that almost a third of all of the goblins that got killed didn't get looted, which is clearly not a very good design. When you're fighting mobs, the biggest challenge should be defeating the mobs, not looting them after they are defeated. There have been some quality of life changes done to this point, and one is that the mob despawn timer was extended from 1 minute to 3 minutes, which gives you more time to loot the mobs, and the free-for-all loot timer changed from 30 seconds to 90 seconds, so people can't steal your loot as quick, which I think are both good changes, although I think the mob despawn timer could be extended even further than that. I know in WoW it was 5 minutes, and a lot of what I'm going to say is related to WoW because their loot system is far better than the way that this is going. So the ongoing issues. First off, mobs tend to die on top of each other. Now even if you tried to move them around, the range mobs like archers don't move very easily, and when they die on top of each other, they're harder to target. And the image on the left kind of shows you that. There's so many mobs on top of each other that they've made this entire goblin like blob monster with like 4 different levels of goblins, and once you kill all those, they're gonna all be piled on top of each other. There's no way you're going to loot that. Not possible. Next thing is that looting has a cast timer. You can't just click on a mob's loot and loot it. You have to use this cast timer, and during that, you're almost certainly, I don't know what the chance of this, but it feels like 100%, where some random archer off in the distance hits you just as you finish your cast timer, or a wolf that came out of nowhere gets one hit on you just to interrupt your cast timer. The next thing is that mobs don't despawn when you loot them. So if you loot a mob, it just stays dead on the ground with no loot on it. And if there's a mob underneath it and they died around the same time, then you don't get a chance to loot that mob underneath. The next thing is that mobs that you can loot are not highlighted. Let's say I'm in a group and we're all killing mobs. I don't really know at that point, if there's been a lot of mobs, which mobs I killed and which mobs other people killed. So we all end up spending time trying to loot each other's mobs just to find out we're not eligible. Now after 90 seconds we all become eligible. However, up to that point, which is half of the time, you don't know who can loot what. And that's the same issue with friendly fire. So goblin archers are very effective at killing goblin hunters. And when they kill them, then you can't loot until that timer is up. So again, you're wasting time trying to loot just to find that you have to wait longer. And by the time you come back to try to loot it again, it's often despawned. Another issue is that bugged mobs can't be looted. And not alone are bugged mobs can't be looted, but you can't just select the loot to close the window. You have to like escape, which slows you down. It often takes longer to open the loot window, saying that it's finding loot as well. So bug mobs are also a major issue. All of these issues can be very easily corrected. One thing that would be very beneficial if mobs can be highlighted when you're eligible to loot them. So let's say you do damage to a mob and you can loot it. That mob should be highlighted in some way. I know in WoW you get this little sparkly on them that shows that yes, this is a mob. And that could also occur after the 90 seconds goes up for the free-for-all loot timer to say that you may not have been eligible to loot that mob previously, but now you are. The next thing is the looting cast timer, which I don't see as beneficial in any way, and I don't know if anyone out there actually enjoys having the looting cast timer. I think just getting rid of it altogether would be the smart move. It would make looting much easier, it'd make it less cumbersome, and frankly a lot less annoying. The biggest thing, however, and this one pretty much has to be added at some point, if a mob has been fully looted, there's no reason for that mob to exist anymore. Those fully looted mobs should despawn close to instantly after the fact. You might want to leave them around for like a couple of seconds just in case someone wants to see what that mob dropped. And in the case of bosses, you can probably keep them around longer. But in most cases, for trash mobs, they should essentially be immediately despawned. The next would be stopping friendly fire. And if you don't want to stop friendly fire and you just want to leave that in the game, the friendly fire damage should not count towards the 90-second timer to have to wait for free-for-all. Say I do 50% of the damage to a goblin hunter and an archer does 50%, I should get that 50% goblin archer's amount immediately because they're clearly not going to loot it. And more advanced things that are probably not really required but tend to be good quality of life changes is auto loot. If you click on looting a mob, it just automatically loots so you don't have to go through and select things or click on loot. And the next, which is the kind of the ultimate in looting, is auto loot with area loot. So you click on one mob and it instantly loots all mobs that you're eligible to loot in your radius. Those changes would make one of the major issues of the game completely void at that point, and the percentage of mobs looted would change from the 70% up to very close to 100%. Essentially, the only things you wouldn't be looting at that point are mobs that you just don't want to bother looting in the first place. And in this video we can show the attempted looting of a brute. So you can see here where it says finding loot. Now this is a bugged brute, and eventually it just says unable to loot, and that particular mob never despawns. Next up we have bugs, and there are many more bugs than what I mentioned here. I just named a few of the significant bugs. So number one, particularly related to Milestone 9, and anyone who's been playing would have noticed this bug immediately, is that when you log in, all of your armor that you had equipped and all of the armor that you had sitting in your inventory has been deleted. And this clearly was not intended. In my particular case, I had enough bronze and essences of the various type where I was able to essentially remake all of my armor instantly. One armor said I was a little short on flax just because I didn't really ever need flax, and my normal mobs that I'd fight never actually have flax, so I had to go farm like 7 flax. But other than that, not a big issue. And this issue essentially will resolve itself in like a week or two when everyone's recovered their armor sets. After this slide, there's a series of videos, and one of them is the Materium going to 0, which is an ongoing issue and occurs in a few different scenarios. One case is when the server kind of lags out and crashes. That can set your Materium to 0, and that particular one tends to be a permanent set to 0. The other one is when you're switching between characters, and this particular bug I have happened very often, that when you log out and you log into a new character, you no longer have any Materium. We'll see that in the video. I've also had a series of very strange login bugs. Auto disconnects when attempting to log in, character already logged in, and the kind of the trippy one where the character select screen is still active and you can still select all your characters and change your race, and you can even change like your gender from male to female while actively in the game. Another one which anyone who's been playing a lot would definitely notice is the cogwheel bug. When this one happens, you can't wield any weapons or unsheath them. So let's say I'm just running with my weapon on my back, and then I want to engage a mob and I want to pull out my weapon. Well, my weapon won't come out so I can use it. So this one tends to happen at the worst possible time. Usually when you actually need to do something to survive, the cogwheel bug happens. And interestingly enough, I've noticed the cogwheel bug often happens to multiple people at the same time. Oftentimes when we were in groups on Discord voice chat, several people got the cogwheel bug all at the same time. So although that's not always the case, it's often synced, which is probably something related to the servers. There's ongoing user interface issues. You'll see this in the video. This is one that I noticed particularly with widescreens, and that has to do with the overlay and transparency issues with the elemental triad. There's also major issues with bug nodes and mobs, and the longer the server is up since the last server reset, and the more people that are either killing mobs in that area or harvesting nodes, the worse it gets. That means that, especially in the early areas and noted for new players, that they find a lot of bug nodes. Those are the first and most easily accessible nodes, meaning that they get interacted with more frequently, and every time a node or a mob is interacted with, there's a chance that it bugs, and those will stay bugged typically until the server resets. Okay, here's the first of a series of videos. So what I'm doing is I'm disconnecting to switch a character, and you can see in the top right I have 542,000 Materium. And I want to go on to another one of my elves. So I'm logging in, and upon logging in, I notice that I have no Materium left. My Materium is now back to 0. And a lot of times you don't even notice this until you actually go to try to spend Materium. And you can see in your inventory Materium is actually 0, and in the top right as well it shows 0. And then when you disconnect to go back to the main screen, sometimes it goes back to normal and sometimes it doesn't. Now this next one was an issue I was having for quite some time, where I would try to connect to the server and then immediately I was disconnected. And sometimes you'd even get this, where you're in the game and things can attack you, and occasionally you can even move around. However, at the same time, you can select all your different exemplars, click on male and female, and even attempt to start the game again while actively in the game. And the last bug here is the Awakening Elemental Triad, which you can see there's major transparency issues where you can't actually read anything. And my final thoughts. So the dev team has continued to push out a ton of content. Specifically, there was a ton of content between Milestone 8 and Milestone 9. At one point, we were getting content almost every single day, and they were pushing it out in piecemeal instead of fully completed products. So for example, we got new weapons that just had placeholder icons and placeholder in-game looks, and then we also later got updated with, say, the Phoenix, which again had placeholders. So they're trying to push content onto us fairly quickly, which is good. There's also been a lot of talk about other kind of hot topics. I mentioned dungeons in this video. Another one that's been a really hot topic for quite a long time, and every single AMA that I watch, there's a question about buildings and deeds. And buildings and deeds go hand in hand. Now, Benefactors, the CEO of Gala Games, did mention that they've expanded the current Mirandus team to specifically tackle buildings and deeds. And there's been some mention on how they would go about doing this initially. I was considering adding that to this current video, although it was getting quite long and we didn't have a lot of information related to that, so I will save the discussion on my thoughts on buildings and deeds to a later video. Now, specifically with this milestone, we've added a few important things. So the charm and trinket slots are a nice addition, and that's going to add much more customization to one's character. The visual buffs are a great quality of life improvement. There's many times where I had no idea what I had equipped and such. One thing that they could add is have a hotkey that you could use to repair your currently equipped weapon, so you don't have to keep switching back to your inventory during combat where you can't see what's going on. And for whatever reason, it always feels like you get attacked when you switch to your inventory. The pets now, all pets that currently exist are out in the game, and they're all functioning and looking good. The Siphon of Chaos ring is consistently and constantly adjusting to what's useful to that particular time period, and I suspect we'll see more sales of those as a result. The new weapons are all nice additions and add to the combat, although I feel they may be a little on the strong side at the present. The female characters, the vast majority of the races that people would play female are currently in the game, and that will be completed soon. Damage resistances, that chart is getting filled out, and within the next year I'd expect that probably to be fully fleshed out. New player progression has got some love with a combination of some changes to make it easier for new players, in addition to the addition of the hollows, which we mentioned. Looting is an ongoing major issue that definitely needs to be tackled, in addition to the multitude of bugs that I mentioned in this video. So overall, I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm also noticing on Discord we're having many more people come in asking about the game and starting to start up new characters. I've also noticed on OpenSea there's a lot more people buying. There are quite a few sales, but the sales tend to be just a few people selling large quantities. There are many more numbers of people actually buying in NFTs at this point. So things are looking up, and I will be continuing to play regularly. I don't know if there will be any events in the near future. However, I will certainly make another video come the end of Milestone 10. So I hope everyone's enjoyed, and thanks.